So we'll get underway. It's a great pleasure to welcome back an old friend of mine. So Brian will tell you about the theme of today, which is time.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Brian. As Brian said, this is my third visit to Oxford May Music, and I think that this event this afternoon, this combination of physics and then the Messiaen quartet for the end of time, for me, is a perfect example of what Oxford May Music should be about, which is not just separate bits of physics and then separate bits of music, but two ideas or themes that complement each other.
The most surprising connections sometimes seem to come into being when you put music and science alongside.
One person said to me that he came to hear Brian, but he'd never heard anything like the Messiaen, and he was absolutely blown away by it. And that's exactly the sort of thing that we hoped would happen.
Brian and I first met about just over 10 years ago. I was interested in science, very interested, and Brian, of course, is super interested in music. We started the festival 8 years ago now. It's our 8th season, and we've had been lecturing about music and physics for many years.
It was essentially Einstein that really started us off on the road that led to the festival, because 2005 was World Year of Physics, and Jack and I were in a pub where all the best ideas come from. And I said, well, I really should do something for World Year of Physics. And Jack said, well, Einstein played the violin. I said, oh, of course he did, didn't he? I'd forgotten about that. And then, of course, we started to think, well, we could do a lecture which would integrate music with Einstein.
We used to do a lot of physics and music lectures where we would actually take the big screen ourselves, lug it in the car, go and put it up, do the lecture, and then drive on to the next place.
That was how we got into science popularization and music.
And we decided that it would be a great thing to make a bigger series out of it.
Music of stone, fearful granite sonorities, the irresistible movement of steel, enormous blocks of purple fury of icy intoxication. Yeah, I think that's about right, don't you?
Sometimes the lectures have something to do with the music involved, but a lot of the time it's just, there's no connection whatsoever, but I kind of like that.
It's a great pleasure to welcome an old friend, Ian Shipsey. I suspect we met actually longer ago than 10 years. I think we met at a conference even longer ago.
One of the things I really enjoy about working with Brian on the festival is the ability to sort of like ask for certain subjects to be covered. So in the past I've said to him, please let's get something to do with nanotechnology, and he's then brought in the most fascinating lecture. We've had all sorts of incredible lectures over the years.
For those who could once hear and suddenly lose all of their hearing, deafness is a terrible disability. In October 1989, I had perfect hearing. But by the end of that year, I had no hearing whatsoever.
So it's the mixing of just world-class fields, you know. It's very inspiring.
And in this talk, I'd like to talk about one of those forms, the cochlear implant. But science is a difficult thing to communicate to the public. Some people would be put off by equations, but artists and musicians can convey science by working with scientists, watching us create things, and then capture that in music or in a picture. Polarized cell rapidly depolarizes.
I think the idea, this old idea that there are two cultures, going back to C.P. Snow famously and way before that, this idea that there's a great divide between the arts and science, or the classicists and the scientists, or whatever it may be. I think it's nonsense, and it always has been nonsense. Art, music, literature have not only a role to play, but are essential.
think it's a bit odd that arts and sciences tend to be slightly separated from each other for a start, and it's not just arts and sciences now, it's the arts splitting off from each other and the various forms of sciences to some extent splitting off. I think it's wonderful to be able to get an overview.
Somehow I find that scientists have also this creative approach, very similar to musicians or composers. No? There is really a parallel in this creation moment.
The crossing of the disciplines is something that is I think people find very important these days. It seems to have been something that has been spoken about more and more in the 10 years that we've been working together.
It's one of the things Oxford is particularly good at, because the college sort of setup in Oxford means that when you're having lunch, for example, you never sit next to a physicist, you sit next to someone who's doing history or German or whatever.
The universities really like the fact that the scientists mix with the arts side of things and the humanities and everything, because in the end it's all just one great big human adventure. It's not separate things that are totally disconnected. They're actually, different aspects of the same world.
This festival really plays to the strengths of Oxford, and the Vice-Chancellor remarked on that when he opened the festival.
I enjoy festivals like this because they force you to think about what your science means. Why did Galileo and Newton and Copernicus, right at the start of modern science, why did they do that stuff? The answer is because they were human and they were curious and they were interested. And that applies equally well to composers. I think actually the motivation for our exploration of nature through science or art or music or literature, the motivation is the same. I think it's a completely artificial distinction. What there is human civilization and human culture.
The festival's based in the Holywell Music Room. That's where we have most of the concerts and lectures.
It's worth 24 hours on a plane, just to play with the calibre of people. You know, being in this hall, the Holywell Hall, which is the first purpose-built chamber music hall in Europe, has been a delight. And I get tingles every time I walk in there and think that Joseph Haydn rehearsed the Oxford Symphony on the same floorboards.
We have a lot of helpers in the festival. Of course, any activity like this needs a lot of help in order to make it work properly. We have a variety of people from Oxford itself, and then we have a couple of extremely great helpers from young people, one from Australia, which is typical again of the festival. We get people from all over the world who come and help. Then Jack's parents are other people who have been great strengths throughout the years. So we have a whole host of people who do an enormously important job in helping us run the festival.
It's fantastic to see such a full house for our penultimate concert of the festival. It's been an amazing festival so far. We've had some great concerts, and I'm sure this is not going to be no different. In our day-to-day lives, Brian meets on sorts of incredibly interesting people, and I also am very lucky in that, you know, when I play concerts around the world, I get to meet these amazing people in their fields, and to then be able to bring that to a festival and put it on, and I think enable other people to experience these things that we are very privileged to. It's an enormous pleasure.
So when you have science and music coming together like this is absolutely wonderful. I'm very glad to be part of it, and I think it's great for Oxford. And it's just terrific that it's so well attended. People are really enjoying it, and we have to do this again.